mankind is destroyed. All that counts is that ultimately the last quarter becomes communist.
Lenin said that. Maybe he didn't mean that 1.5 billion persons actually had to be destroyed. Yet communist followers of Lenin, of Stalin, of Malenkov are willing to go that far. But the communists know how to destroy without bombs and bullets. They know how to destroy the minds and souls of men by threats of treachery, blackmail, lies, and brutality. They have been so successful that today, in Europe and Asia, 800 million people, 1/3 of mankind, exist under communist tyranny without the God-given rights of freedom and human dignity. The communists have no intention of stopping until they are stopped. This is the story of a major battle for peace, the story of how you and other free people can stop them by using the weapons of peace. This is the story of your crusade for freedom. It has been the lot of most of us in our lifetime to have witnessed 3 attempts upon the security of our country and our way of life. World War I, World War II, and more recently, Korea. The objective of all our enemies has always been the same: to destroy the dignity of the individual and substitute the rule of tyrants. The shooting in Korea is over, at least for the moment. But the battle for freedom goes on. You read about it every day in the newspapers, and you hear about it every day over the radio and television from commentators like myself. Possibly you're tired of it. Possibly you want to forget. Maybe so, but your enemy isn't tired, and your enemy is not relaxing. This film will tell you about one vital way in which communism is being fought, and of how you can help in that fight. The battleground of peace today is that strip of strategically located countries stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea, known to all of us as the Iron Curtain countries: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and Albania. They are not big countries geographically, but they contain 70 million freedom-loving people, our kind of people, who share our culture and who have sent millions of their sons and daughters to become part of these United States. Some call these countries the satellite nations. More accurately, they are the captive nations of Europe. Their freedoms were stolen by the Soviets. Caught in the backwash of World War II, their peoples were given no choice. They had Soviet rule forced upon them, like it or not. They do not like it. You may ask, why should I be concerned with the plight of 70 million people in far-off Central and Eastern Europe? The answer is simple. Because if the battle for peace is won there, the battles of World War III may never be fought. These countries are the outpost and springboard of Soviet aggression in Europe. If they become firmly integrated into the Soviet war machine, the Kremlin is better able to strike. Today, the Soviet maintains some 500,000 Russian troops and over 80 major airfields in this area, in addition to another 500,000 satellite troops and 350,000 security police. As long as the Soviet dominates the strategic band in Europe, at best, we shall have an uneasy peace. But these countries are not yet firmly integrated into the Soviet machine. They have taken everything a vicious police state could throw at them, and they have not knuckled under. So long as they don't, so long as hope and encouragement from free peoples maintain their resistance, the Soviet is off balance. It is the lack of certainty about what the satellite troops would do in time of war, its fear of disrupted lines of communication, that is keeping the Kremlin unsettled. Our future depends upon continuing to keep the Soviet off balance and thus lessen the danger of another world war. That is where the Crusade for Freedom, the National Committee for a Free Europe, and Radio Free Europe come in. When after World War II, these nations were swallowed up by the Soviet one by one, it was painfully evident to the free world that we could no longer tolerate such a thing. General Lucius Clay, then United States military governor of Germany, drew a line around Berlin and said, "No further." History was made in 1949 with the Berlin airlift, providing a lifeline for almost 3 million people, a symbol of American determination and an unparalleled example of technical superiority. But this was just a beginning. Once communist objectives were apparent, a group of Americans, as private citizens, decided to do something to combat them. They formed the National Committee for Free Europe. Someone had to tell the enslaved peoples that they were not alone, forgotten, forsaken. And the one sure weapon for penetrating the Iron Curtain was radio. Thus, in 1949, the idea of Radio Free Europe was born. Its first station went on the air July 4, 1950. From the first 7.5-watt transmitter of those days, Radio Free Europe has grown until today it is the voice of free Czechoslovakia, the voice of free Hungary, the voice of free Poland, the voice of free Romania, the voice of free Bulgaria. Today, these stations operate 21 transmitters out of West Germany and Portugal. One transmitter, rated at 135,000 watts, is one of the most powerful medium-wave transmitters in the world. The others are short-wave transmitters, most of them with a 50,000-watt signal. Over these transmitters, programs are broadcast from 18 to 20 hours each day to captive countries, a total of 2,500 hours a week. To overcome the efforts of hundreds of Soviet stations to jam them, Radio Free Europe transmitters are operated on a wide range of wavelengths to guarantee the programs get through to the countless receiving sets behind the Iron Curtain. In Czechoslovakia alone, for example, are 2,800,000 receivers. How is Radio Free Europe run so that the captive peoples will want to listen and will get something out of listening? Firstly, by having their own people broadcast to them in their own language. And then, by programming to their wants and needs. They don't need to be told how bad communism is. They know it better than we do. But they are fed lies and half-truths, day in and day out. They want the things the communists deprive them of. What are they? Truth about the free world. True news about their own countries and communities. Religion denied them in a slave state, their own music and culture. And laughter, especially laughter. There's nothing to laugh about behind the Iron Curtain. Laughs must be imported. For broadcast to the target countries, Radio Free Europe uses known and respected exiles and escapees, writers, political leaders, entertainers, editors from behind the Iron Curtain. They speak to their brothers not as propagandists for another nation, but as free men talking to men who are determined to be free. Radio Free Europe's broadcasts are not the only ones penetrating the Iron Curtain. The Voice of America, BBC, Radio Vatican, or others. But Radio Free Europe, operated as an independent enterprise by a committee of private citizens, is able to go much farther than official government stations in combating Soviet lies and encouraging resistance. The Voice of America broadcasts to dozens of countries and therefore can only devote a limited amount of time each day to any one country. Radio Free Europe's Voice of Free Czechoslovakia, on the other hand, broadcasts about 20 hours a day to Czechoslovakia alone. Radio Free Europe exposes and ridicules the Soviets and their henchmen. It undermines the Reds' morale and knocks them off balance. It identifies police informers by name and exposes brutalities and crimes against decent citizens. It meets the spiritual and cultural needs of the oppressed nation. It uses facts to combat Soviet propaganda. and it exposes the great Soviet lie machine. It helps Iron Curtain youth remain free in spirit and resist the poison of Moscow. And it does these things well. Radio Free Europe even scoops the communists on their own news. It broke the stories of Stalin's death and Beria's arrest, hours before they went out to the satellite countries over the communist-controlled radio. To provide the specialized news needed for its programs, Radio Free Europe maintains an information network covering the whole of Europe from London to Istanbul. Here, Radio Free Europe has the finest professional press people interrogating refugees who come out, going over countless current publications of the various regimes, monitoring Iron Curtain broadcasts. Radio Free Europe gets through. As a matter of fact, it is estimated that the Reds spend more money trying to drown out the voices of the free world than Radio Free Europe spends in transmitting the truth behind the Iron Curtain. Representatives of the puppet governments protest to our State Department against the activities of Radio Free Europe. The Reds devote pages of their skimpy newspapers to denouncing Radio Free Europe. They even put cabinet ministers on the air to refute Radio Free Europe truthcasts. The people behind the Iron Curtain, through letters smuggled to Crusade for Freedom, through escapees and other channels, tell Radio Free Europe every day, you give us hope. The Reds are jumpy. You spark our will to resist. Keep it up. This great story of achievement by Radio Free Europe has been made possible by the contributions of millions of American citizens and organizations, giving each year through Crusade for Freedom campaigns. These contributions have actively engaged in the war between the free world and Soviet slavery. Truth, reason, enlightenment can penetrate communist barriers. The Iron Curtain itself is vulnerable to truth as delivered by Radio Free Europe. We know that the people in the captive countries listen and believe and continue to resist. We know, too, that this resistance is helping prevent World War III. President Eisenhower, speaking about the Crusade, says, through Radio Free Europe, men and women who might otherwise have succumbed to the philosophy that it is good to be slaves, still keep alive the spark of freedom in their hearts. This work serves not only the nations we seek to help, it serves the best interests of the United States. I urge every American to support this independent American enterprise dedicated to strengthening the will to freedom. This is your crusade for freedom.